The town of Cedar Hill loomed ahead, a picturesque facade masking the secrets buried within. Flora parked the car in front of the old, rustic inn they were to stay at, her eyes scanning the quaint surroundings. The inn, with its ivy-covered walls and antique charm, seemed like a relic of a forgotten era. Yet, despite its serene exterior, an undercurrent of tension permeated the air, as if the town itself harbored unspoken truths. As Flora stepped inside, she was greeted by the innkeeper, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to Cedar Hill Inn. I'm Martha." "You must be Flora," she said, extending her hand. "Yes, that's me," Flora replied, shaking Martha's hand. "My family should have arrived earlier." Martha's smile faltered slightly. "Yes, they checked in about an hour ago. They're in room 204. Here's your key." Flora took the key, a sense of unease settling in her stomach. She made her way up the creaky staircase, the old wood groaning under her weight. As she reached the door to room 204, she paused, her hand hovering over the doorknob. The sounds of muffled voices filtered through the door, and Flora couldn't help but eavesdrop. "Why did you have to bring her along?" Her mother-in-law's voice was sharp, filled with disdain. "Because she's my wife, Mother," Steve replied, his tone weary. "I didn't have a choice." Flora's heart sank. She knew her in-laws didn't like her, but hearing it so blatantly was a blow. She took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and walked in. The conversation abruptly halted, and all eyes turned to her. "Oh, Flora, you're here," Steve said, forcing a smile. "We were just talking about you." "Clearly," Flora replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The room was small and cluttered, a stark contrast to the idyllic exterior of the inn. Her in-laws sat on the bed, their expressions a mix of annoyance and resignation. Steve stood by the window, looking out at the town below. "Well, now that you're here, we can finally get settled," her father-in-law said, his tone dismissive. Flora nodded, too exhausted to argue. She placed her bags in a corner and sat down on the chair by the small desk. The tension in the room was palpable, an invisible barrier between her and the rest of the family. As the evening wore on, Flora found herself outside, unable to bear the suffocating atmosphere any longer. She wandered through the town, the cool night air a welcome relief. The streets were empty, the only sound the distant chirping of crickets. She walked aimlessly, her thoughts a whirlwind of frustration and sadness. Eventually, she found herself at the edge of the town, where an old, abandoned house stood. The windows were boarded up, and the paint was peeling off in large chunks. Something about the house drew her in, a sense of familiarity she couldn't quite place. She stepped closer, her heart pounding in her chest. As she reached the front porch, she heard a faint noise from inside. It was barely audible, but it sent a shiver down her spine. She hesitated, her hand reaching for the doorknob. The door creaked open, revealing a dark hallway. Flora took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the floorboards creaked under her weight. She moved cautiously, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. The house seemed frozen in time, a relic of a past long forgotten. She wandered through the rooms, her unease growing with each step. In one of the rooms, she found an old photograph. It was faded and worn, but she could make out the faces of a family, a man, a woman, and a young girl. There was something hauntingly familiar about them. She studied the photograph, her mind racing with questions. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, her heart in her throat. A figure stood in the doorway, shrouded in darkness. "Who's there?" Flora demanded, her voice trembling. The figure stepped forward, revealing a young man with piercing blue eyes. He looked at her with a mix of curiosity and caution. "I'm Ethan," he said. "I live here." "Who are you?" "I'm Flora," she replied, her voice steadying. "I'm staying at the inn. I didn't mean to intrude." Ethan nodded, his expression softening. "It's all right. This house, it has a way of drawing people in." Flora felt a strange connection to Ethan, as if they were kindred spirits. They talked for a while, sharing stories and secrets. She learned that Ethan had lived in Cedar Hill his whole life and that the town was filled with mysteries and hidden truths. As the night wore on, Flora realized that her encounter with Ethan was the beginning of something much bigger. She felt a sense of purpose, a drive to uncover the secrets of Cedar Hill and the truth behind the abandoned house. When she returned to the inn, the tension with her in-laws seemed insignificant in comparison. She had a mission now, and nothing would stand in her way. The fractured foundation of her life was starting to rebuild, one mystery at a time. Flora unlocked the front door, the familiar creak echoing through the empty house. She stepped inside, her footsteps soft against the hardwood floor. The house, once filled with the sounds of domestic life, now felt like a hollow shell. Flora's mind was a whirlwind of emotions, a mix of betrayal, anger, and a strange sense of liberation. She replayed the conversation she had overheard 6 months ago, Steve's voice still ringing in her ears. "You don't understand, Flora. She's my soulmate. We have a history," Steve had said, his tone pleading and earnest. "History? What about our history?" Flora had retorted, her voice shaking with a mix of fury and hurt. Steve had looked at her with a mixture of guilt and defiance. "We've been living a lie, Flora. This marriage isn't real anymore." That moment had shattered something deep inside her. For years, she had tried to keep their marriage together, despite the growing distance and unspoken resentments. But Steve's betrayal was the final straw. Now, as she stood in their home, the emptiness around her mirrored the void in her heart. Flora took a deep breath and made her way to the study. She sat down at the desk, the weight of her decision pressing heavily on her shoulders. She had spent the past few months gathering evidence of Steve's infidelity, knowing it would support her case for divorce. Flora opened the drawer and pulled out a folder, its contents a testament to the betrayal she had endured. Photos, text messages, and emails, all proof of Steve's affair with his childhood friend Emily. Each piece of evidence felt like a knife to the heart, but it also fueled her resolve. She couldn't continue living a lie. Flora began to organize the documents, her hands shaking slightly. As she worked, memories of their life together flooded her mind. The early days of their relationship, filled with laughter and love. The gradual erosion of their bond, replaced by indifference and resentment. She remembered the nights she had spent alone, waiting for Steve to come home, only to be met with excuses and lies. Flora's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. She glanced at the clock. Steve was home earlier than usual. Her heart pounded in her chest as she quickly gathered the papers and stuffed them back into the drawer. She stood up, trying to compose herself as the front door opened. "Flora, are you home?" Steve's voice echoed through the house. "Yes, I'm here," she called out, her voice steady. Steve appeared in the doorway of the study, his expression one of surprise. "What are you doing in here?" "Just organizing some things," Flora replied, forcing a smile. "How was your day?" Steve shrugged, his eyes scanning the room. "Same as usual. Busy. What about you?" "Productive," Flora said, her smile unwavering. "I was just thinking about our conversation from 6 months ago." Steve's face hardened. "Flora, I thought we agreed to put that behind us." "I can't," Flora said, her voice firm. "I've been gathering evidence of your affair with Emily. I'm filing for divorce." Steve's eyes widened, a mix of shock and anger flashing across his face. "You can't be serious." "I am," Flora replied, her resolve unshaken. "I'm done living a lie. I deserve better." Steve took a step forward, his expression softening. "Flora, please. Let's talk about this. We can work things out." Flora shook her head, her heart aching. "There's nothing left to work out, Steve. Our marriage is over." Steve opened his mouth to argue, but Flora held up a hand. "Please, just leave. I need some time to think." Steve stared at her for a moment, his eyes filled with a mix of desperation and defeat. Finally, he turned and walked out of the study, the sound of the front door closing behind him echoing through the house. Flora sank back into the chair, the weight of her decision settling heavily on her shoulders. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to rebuild her life, one step at a time. A week later, Flora found herself in a small cafe in the heart of the city. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and the soft murmur of conversations provided a comforting background noise. She had arranged to meet with her lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Grace who came highly recommended. "Flora, it's good to see you," Grace said as she slid into the booth opposite her. "Thanks for meeting me," Flora replied, offering a small smile. Grace nodded, her expression serious. "I've reviewed the evidence you provided. We have a strong case. Steve won't be able to contest the divorce without significant repercussions." Flora felt a sense of relief wash over her. "That's good to hear. I just want this to be over." "I understand," Grace said, her tone compassionate. "But there's something else we need to discuss." Flora's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Grace leaned in, lowering her voice. "I've done some digging into Steve's background. It appears he's been hiding something, a substantial amount of money in an offshore account." Flora's eyes widened in shock. "What? Why would he do that?" "I'm not sure," Grace replied, "but it raises some serious questions. We need to investigate further." Flora's mind raced with possibilities. Had Steve been planning to leave her and start a new life with Emily? Or was there something more sinister at play? The sense of betrayal deepened, but so did her resolve to uncover the truth. "What do we do next?" Flora asked, her voice steady. "We'll need to gather more information," Grace said. "I'll reach out to some contacts and see what we can find. In the meantime, be careful. If Steve knows we're onto him, he might try to cover his tracks." Flora nodded, her mind focused on the task ahead. The sense of urgency and tension that had been building over the past few months now felt like a driving force. She was determined to uncover the secrets Steve had been hiding, no matter the cost. Later that evening, Flora sat in her living room, the weight of the day's revelations pressing heavily on her. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Steve's betrayal than just an affair. The discovery of the offshore account added a new layer of complexity to the situation, one that she couldn't ignore. As she sat in the dimly lit room, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone ringing. She glanced at the caller ID and saw Grace's name. Her heart pounded in her chest as she answered the call. "Grace, did you find something?" Flora asked, her voice tinged with anxiety. "Yes," Grace replied, her tone serious. "I reached out to a contact who specializes in financial investigations. It appears that Steve has been involved in some questionable business dealings. There's a possibility that he's been laundering money." Flora's blood ran cold. "Laundering money? How is that possible?" "I'm not sure yet," Grace said. "But it's clear that Steve has been hiding more than just an affair. We need to proceed with caution." Flora's mind raced with the implications of Grace's words. The man she had once loved and trusted had betrayed her in ways she couldn't have imagined. But amidst the shock and hurt, a newfound determination took hold. She was no longer a passive participant in her own life. She was a force to be reckoned with, ready to uncover the truth and reclaim her future. As she hung up the phone, Flora knew that the road ahead would be challenging. But she also knew that she was not alone. With Grace by her side, she felt a glimmer of hope. The fractured foundation of her life was beginning to rebuild, one revelation at a time. And as the secrets of the past were unveiled, Flora was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The soft hum of the city served as the backdrop to Flora's new beginning. She met her real estate agent, Linda, in the lobby of the apartment building. Linda was a kind woman in her 40s, with warm eyes and a reassuring smile. She had been instrumental in helping Flora navigate the tumultuous process of finding a new home. "I'm so glad we found something that suits you," Linda said, handing Flora the keys. "I know it's been a difficult time, but this is a fresh start." Flora nodded, her grip on the keys tightening. "Thank you, Linda. You've been a huge help. I can't wait to get settled." The apartment was modest but cozy, a stark contrast to the house she had shared with Steve. It was a two-bedroom unit with large windows that let in plenty of natural light. The living room was small but inviting, and the kitchen, though compact, had all the essentials. Flora could already picture the space filled with the warmth of new memories. Anson, Flora's 15-year-old son, stood by the window, looking out at the city below. He had taken the news of the move surprisingly well, his calm acceptance a reflection of the resilience Flora had always admired in him. "What do you think, Anson?" Flora asked, walking over to stand beside him. Anson turned to her, a small smile on his lips. "It's nice, Mom. I think we'll be happy here." Flora felt a surge of emotion. Despite everything, Anson remained her rock. His support meant more to her than anything. "I'm glad you think so. This is our new beginning." They spent the next few days moving their belongings into the apartment. The process was exhausting but cathartic. Each box unpacked, each piece of furniture arranged felt like a step towards reclaiming their lives. Flora found solace in the routine, the sense of control it brought amidst the chaos. One evening, after they had finished setting up the last of Anson's things, they sat on the couch, sharing a pizza. The living room was still sparsely decorated, but it already felt like home. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Anson said, his tone tentative. "Of course, sweetheart." "What's on your mind?" Flora replied, taking a sip of her soda. "Do you ever regret marrying Dad?" Anson's question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotions. Flora took a deep breath, considering her response. "There were good times, Anson. Your dad and I were happy once. But things changed. People change. I don't regret marrying him because it gave me you. And I don't regret leaving him because it's what's best for us now." Anson nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I get it. I just want you to be happy." Flora reached out, squeezing his hand. "I want us both to be happy. And we will be. It's going to take time, but we'll get there." The bond between mother and son was stronger than ever, forged through shared struggles and unwavering support. As they sat together, Flora felt a glimmer of hope for the future. The next morning, Flora woke up early, the soft light of dawn filtering through the curtains. She had a meeting with Grace later in the day, and the anticipation filled her with a sense of urgency. The discovery of Steve's offshore account and potential money laundering had opened a new chapter in her life, one filled with uncertainty and danger. After getting dressed and ensuring Anson was set for school, Flora made her way to the cafe where she was to meet Grace. The place was bustling with morning activity, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the chatter of patrons. Flora spotted Grace at a corner table, already engrossed in some documents. "Good morning, Grace," Flora greeted as she sat down. "Morning, Flora," Grace replied, looking up with a smile. "I hope you're ready for some more revelations." Flora's heart skipped a beat. "What did you find?" Grace leaned forward, her expression serious. "I've been digging deeper into Steve's financial records. It turns out he was involved in some shady business deals with a company known for illegal activities. There's a strong possibility he was laundering money through his offshore accounts." Flora felt a mix of anger and fear. "I can't believe you would do something like this. How could I have been so blind?" "Don't blame yourself," Grace said firmly. "Steve went to great lengths to hide this from you. The important thing now is to protect yourself and Anson. We need to gather more evidence and build a solid case." Flora nodded, her resolve hardening. "What do we do next?" Grace pulled out a stack of papers, handing them to Flora. "These are copies of Steve's transactions. I've highlighted the suspicious ones. We'll need to trace the money and find out where it went. I've also contacted a private investigator who specializes in financial crimes. He'll help us piece everything together." Flora glanced through the documents, her mind racing. "This is overwhelming, but I'm ready to do whatever it takes. Steve can't get away with this." "We'll make sure he doesn't," Grace assured her. "But you need to be careful. If Steve realizes we're onto him, he might take drastic measures." Flora felt a chill run down her spine. I'll be careful. Thank you, Grace. I don't know what I would do without you. We're in this together, Grace said, her voice filled with determination. We'll get through it. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. As the days turned into weeks, Flora and Grace worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. The private investigator, Tom, proved to be a valuable asset, his expertise in financial crimes helping them make significant progress. Flora juggled her responsibilities at work, her role as a mother, and the ongoing investigation, her life a delicate balancing act. One evening, Flora was going through some old documents in the study when she came across a letter addressed to Steve. The return address was unfamiliar, but something about it caught her attention. She opened it carefully, her curiosity piqued. The letter was from a man named Richard, a former business associate of Steve's. It detailed the deal they had made, hinting at illegal activities and large sums of money exchanged. Flora's heart raced as she read the letter, realizing it was the missing piece they needed to connect Steve to the money laundering scheme. She called Grace immediately, her hands trembling. "Grace, I found something. A letter from one of Steve's associates. It mentions their illegal deals and the money involved." "That's incredible, Flora," Grace said, her excitement palpable. "This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. I'll come over right away." Grace arrived within the hour, her eyes alight with determination. They spread the documents out on the dining table, analyzing every detail. The letter provided crucial information, linking Steve to the illegal activities they had suspected. "This is it," Grace said, her voice filled with conviction. "We have enough to go to the authorities. Steve's been lying to you and breaking the law. It's time to hold him accountable." Flora felt a surge of emotions, relief, anger, and a renewed sense of purpose. "Let's do it. I want this to be over." They spent the next few days preparing their case, working with a private investigator to ensure they had all the evidence they needed. When they finally presented their findings to the authorities, the response was swift and decisive. Steve was arrested, his double life exposed for all to see. The scandal rocked their social circle, but Flora felt a sense of justice. She had fought for the truth and won. As she stood in her apartment, looking out at the city below, Flora felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The road ahead would still be challenging, but she was no longer weighed down by the past. With Anson by her side and a newfound strength within her, she was ready to embrace the future. Flora sat at her kitchen table, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the room. The relentless buzzing of her phone filled the silence, a constant reminder of Steve's desperation. She glanced at the screen and sighed, her resolve hardening with each ignored call. The roller coaster of emotions Steve's messages had put her through, from pleading to anger, promises to threats, only reinforced her decision to move on. When the phone buzzed again, she hesitated before answering. "What is it, Steve?" Her voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil she felt inside. "Flora, listen to me." Steve's voice was frantic. "I've left her. It's over. It's just us now. Please, we can fix this." A deep breath steadied Flora's racing heart. "Steve, you don't get it. This isn't about you leaving her or making promises. It's about trust, respect, and everything you've destroyed. We're done. I'm done." Steve's tone shifted, becoming more desperate. "Flora, please. I made a mistake, but we can get through this. We've been through worse." "No, Steve," Flora said firmly. "You made a series of choices that led us here, and now I'm making mine. This cycle is over. I need to move forward, and you need to accept that." Flora ended the call, feeling a mixture of relief and finality. She had spent years trying to fix a marriage that was beyond repair, and now, for the first time, she felt a sense of freedom. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional upheaval. Flora's lawyer, Grace, was a constant source of support, guiding her through the complexities of the divorce and the ongoing investigation into Steve's financial misdeeds. One evening, as Flora was organizing her documents, Anson walked into the room, his face etched with concern. "Mom, is everything okay?" Flora looked up, her expression softening. "It's a lot, Anson, but we're getting through it. How are you holding up?" Anson shrugged, sitting down beside her. "I'm okay, I guess. It's just weird. I never thought Dad would do something like this." Flora reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I know it's hard to understand, but what's important is that we're safe, and we're moving forward. We're going to be okay." Anson nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I believe you, Mom. We're a team, right?" "Always," Flora replied, pulling him into a hug. "Always." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. As the investigation progressed, more layers of Steve's deception came to light. The offshore accounts, the money laundering, and the web of lies he had spun were laid bare. Flora worked closely with Grace and Tom, the private investigator, piecing together the evidence that would ensure Steve faced the consequences of his actions. One day, Tom called with urgent news. "Flora, we need to meet. I've uncovered something significant." Flora's heart raced as she agreed to meet him at a nearby park. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the landscape as she approached the designated bench. Tom was already there, a folder in his hands. "Flora, I think we have everything we need," Tom said, handing her the folder. "These documents link Steve directly to the illegal activities. There's no way he can talk his way out of this." Flora flipped through the papers, her emotions a mix of triumph and sadness. "Thank you, Tom. You've been incredible." "It's my job," Tom replied, a hint of a smile on his face. "But I admire your strength. This hasn't been easy." Flora nodded, her gaze distant. "No, it hasn't, but it's worth it. I need to protect Anson and myself." As they parted ways, Flora felt a sense of determination. The end was in sight, and she was ready to face whatever came next. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The day of Steve's trial arrived, a culmination of months of hard work and emotional strain. Flora sat in the courtroom, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Anson was beside her, his presence a source of comfort. Steve entered the room, his once confident demeanor now replaced by a look of defeat. He avoided Flora's gaze, the weight of his actions finally bearing down on him. The trial was a blur of testimonies, evidence, and legal jargon. Grace presented their case with precision, each piece of evidence painting a clear picture of Steve's guilt. Flora listened intently, her emotions a turbulent mix of anger, sadness, and vindication. As the judge delivered the verdict, a heavy silence fell over the courtroom. "Stephen Mitchell, you are found guilty of money laundering, fraud, and breach of trust. You are hereby sentenced to 15 years in prison." The gavel's final thud echoed through the room, a symbol of justice served. Steve was led away, his expression a mixture of shock and resignation. Flora felt a surge of relief, knowing that he could no longer harm her or Anson. Outside the courthouse, Flora and Anson stood together, the sun shining brightly above them. "It's over," Anson said, his voice filled with awe. "Yes, it is," Flora replied, a sense of peace washing over her. "We're free." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. In the weeks that followed, Flora focused on rebuilding her life. She embraced her new job with enthusiasm, finding joy in the routine and the sense of purpose it brought. Anson thrived in his new school, his resilience and determination shining through. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of their apartment, Anson turned to Flora with a thoughtful expression. "Mom, do you ever think about the future? Like, what comes next?" Flora smiled, looking out at the city lights. "All the time, Anson, and you know what? I'm excited about it. We've been through so much, but we're stronger for it. The future is ours to shape." Anson nodded, a look of determination in his eyes. "Yeah, it is. And I know we'll make it great." Flora felt a swell of pride and love for her son. They had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger. The past was behind them, and the future was filled with endless possibilities. As they sat together, the city a vibrant tapestry of life and light, Flora knew that they were ready for whatever came next. The turning point had passed, and a new chapter awaited, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Flora awoke to the soft, rhythmic tapping of rain against her bedroom window. The sound was comforting, a gentle reminder of the cleansing power of nature. She stretched and sat up, a smile playing on her lips as she looked around her new apartment. The space was a reflection of her newfound independence and peace. The walls were adorned with art she loved, the furniture was comfortable and chosen with care, and a small dog named Max bounded into the room, wagging his tail with infectious enthusiasm. "Good morning, Max," Flora said, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. Max responded with a joyful bark, his eyes sparkling with affection. Flora had adopted him a few weeks after moving in, and his presence had brought an unexpected joy into her life. He was a constant reminder of the simple pleasures and unconditional love that had been missing for so long. After a quick breakfast, Flora took Max for a walk. The rain had tapered off to a light drizzle, the air crisp and fresh. They strolled through the nearby park, Flora enjoying the feel of the cool breeze on her face and the sight of the vibrant greenery. It was a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of her previous life, and she reveled in the sense of freedom. Later that day, Anson came over for lunch. His visits had become more frequent, their relationship growing stronger with each passing day. The shadow of Steve's disapproval no longer loomed over them, allowing for a deeper connection to flourish. "Hey, Mom," Anson greeted as he walked in, a broad smile on his face. "Smells amazing in here. What are we having?" "Your favorite, spaghetti carbonara," Flora replied, her eyes twinkling with pride. "I figured we'd celebrate." "Celebrate what?" Anson asked, curiosity piqued as he set the table. "Life," Flora said simply. "The fact that we're here, together, and moving forward." Anson's smile widened, and he pulled her into a hug. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, Anson," Flora replied, her heart swelling with emotion. More than anything, they enjoyed their meal, laughter, and conversation filling the apartment. It was moments like these that Flora cherished, the simple yet profound connections that made life meaningful. After lunch, they sat on the couch, reminiscing about the past and dreaming about the future. Anson's eyes lit up as he talked about his plans for college and the new friends he had made. Flora listened intently, her heart brimming with pride and hope. "Mom, do you ever think about going back to the resort town?" Anson asked suddenly. "You know, for a visit, not to escape." Flora considered the question, her mind drifting back to the serene beauty of the place. It had been a sanctuary during a tumultuous time, but she was no longer running from her past. "I do think about it," she admitted. "But now it would be different. It would be a place of peace and reflection, not a refuge." "Maybe we could go together sometime," Anson suggested. "It could be our new tradition." Flora smiled, touched by the idea. "I would love that, Anson. It sounds perfect." The weeks turned into months, and Flora continued to build a life filled with purpose and contentment. She found joy in her work, took up painting as a hobby, and made new friends who enriched her life in ways she had never imagined. Max remained her faithful companion, his boundless energy and love a constant source of happiness. One crisp autumn morning, Flora decided to visit the resort town. She packed a small bag, left Max with a trusted neighbor, and set off on the familiar drive. The journey was filled with a sense of anticipation and peace, a stark contrast to the desperation she had felt the last time she made this trip. Arriving at the resort, Flora was greeted by the familiar sights and sounds. The gentle lapping of the lake against the shore, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, and the distant laughter of children playing. It was as if time had stood still, the beauty and tranquility of the place unchanged. Flora checked into a cozy cabin and spent the afternoon walking along the lakeside, her thoughts drifting. She reflected on the journey she had taken, the challenges she had overcome, and the person she had become. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the resilience that had carried her through the darkest times. That evening, as the sun set over the lake, Flora sat on the porch of her cabin, a cup of tea in hand. The sky was a canvas of vibrant colors, the water reflecting the brilliance of the setting sun. She felt a deep sense of contentment, knowing that she had found her way back to herself. The next morning, Flora decided to visit a small cafe in town. The place had always been a favorite of hers, and she was eager to see if it had changed. As she walked in, the warm, inviting atmosphere embraced her. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods filled the air, and she took a moment to savor the familiarity. Flora ordered a cup of coffee and a pastry, finding a seat by the window. As she sipped her coffee, she noticed a familiar face across the room. It was Marcy, the cafe owner, and someone Flora had always enjoyed chatting with during her previous visits. "Flora, is that you?" Marcy exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with recognition. Flora smiled warmly. "Yes, Marcy, it's me. It's been a while." Marcy rushed over, pulling Flora into a tight embrace. "I can't believe it. It's so good to see you. How have you been?" "I've been good," Flora replied, her heart full. "Life has been a journey, but I'm in a good place now." They sat together, catching up on lost time. Flora shared her story, the struggles she had faced and the triumphs she had achieved. Marcy listened intently, her expression a mix of admiration and empathy. "I'm so proud of you, Flora," Marcy said, her voice filled with sincerity. "You've come such a long way. It's inspiring." "Thank you, Marcy," Flora replied, feeling a deep sense of validation. "It hasn't been easy, but I'm grateful for where I am now." As they parted ways, Flora felt a renewed sense of connection to the place and the people who had once been a part of her life. The visit had been more than just a trip down memory lane. It was a celebration of her journey and the strength she had found within herself. Returning to the city, Flora felt a sense of accomplishment and peace. She had faced her past, embraced her present, and looked forward to her future with hope and resilience. The visit to the resort town had been a reminder how far she had come and the possibilities that lay ahead. One evening, as Flora stood on the balcony of her apartment, the city's skyline a backdrop to her thoughts, Anson joined her. He leaned against the railing, his gaze thoughtful. "You seem different, Mom," Anson said, breaking the comfortable silence. "More at peace." Flora smiled, her eyes reflecting the city's twinkling lights. "I am, Anson. Visiting the resort town helped me see how much I've grown and how much we have to look forward to." Anson nodded, his expression filled with understanding. "I'm glad. You deserve all the happiness in the world." "And so do you, Anson," Flora replied, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "We've been through a lot, but we've come out stronger. The future is ours to shape, and I know it's going to be amazing." As they stood together, the city a vibrant tapestry of life and light, Flora felt a profound sense of contentment. The journey had been long and challenging, but it had led to a place of peace and hope. With Anson by her side and a heart full of resilience and grace, Flora was ready to embrace whatever the future held. A new dawn had arrived, and with it, the promise of a brighter tomorrow.